Hi, I'm Mitra. I'm a licensed tour guide in Italy. I'm also a virtuoso travel advisor. Today, I want to talk about the grand imperial crown jewel of Rome. That's right, I'm talking about the Colosseum. I want to give you an introduction to the basics of the Colosseum itself. Are you ready? Let's go! The Colosseum isn't actually called the Colosseum in ancient Roman times. That should be maybe the first thing that we talk about. The word Colosseum we invent much later on in history because she was a colossus. She was a giant. She was also known as a giant meeting spot, a colossal forum. So Colosseum became a natural way to just nickname her. But the real name is the Flavian Amphitheater, named after those who built her. You see, we have an emperor in Rome called Emperor Nero. Emperor Nero had ruled the city, and not in the best kind of ways. This was a man who was famous for his debauchery, his corruption, and quite frankly, absolute insanity. Killing people for fun and for games, and running Rome into their worst financial crisis of their existence. So bad was the debt left behind by Nero that Rome would actually never recover from it, and eventually became a reason of many of the entire downfall of the Roman Empire. After Nero's death, though, there is an entire year where there are people vying for the position. You see, we did not necessarily pass on the title of emperor simply because you left an heir behind. It was a vote done by the public. 1 year after Nero's death, the man who will eventually win the vote to become the new emperor of Rome in the year 69 AD is the 69-year-old General Vespasian. Vespasian will come to power, and one of the first things on his agenda was to quell the uprising was happening over in Jerusalem, sending his son Titus to end it all. Titus will march on Jerusalem in 70 AD and will put the Jews through the worst sacking of their history in Jerusalem of the time. Returning to Rome, allegedly in history, they claim he had 80,000 prisoners of war with him, but this is where I, as a historian, need to tell you something very important about numbers in history. We really love to exaggerate. One of the best advices I was given by a Roman archaeologist and history teacher when I first started studying here many moons ago was to take whatever number we read about, whether it was in favor or not favorable, to cut them at least in half, if not even a third. You see, 80,000 people marching into the city would have left a rather massive imprint in terms of housing needing to be built and also tombs. And the archaeologists here say simply there's not quite enough evidence. But the point of the matter is, a lot of people were relocated from the east into the west. And it is these prisoners of war who are going to start the construction, together with local masons and artists, of what will become the largest amphitheater built in Roman times. It wasn't the first one, but it would be the biggest and the most solid one. Romans could make amphitheaters out of wood, they could make them with wheels so they could move them, but the biggest one up until this point could have seated some 30 to 35,000 people. But the Flavian Amphitheater that was going to be built between 72 and 80 AD, so in 8 years, we built 5 levels of seating for 50,000 people. Eventually we added a 6th upper level for 24,000 more. So in total, 74,000 spectators that could sit in this amphitheater, coming in through 80 gates. Every single gate of the Colosseum had a number above its door. The number corresponded to your ranking in society. So, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, you knew exactly where to go and how to go in and sit. Once you then walked into the Colosseum, you would have walked into what we today would consider the mother of all sports stadiums. There were individual concessions, and as you walked into the Colosseum, you have this high arched architecture all around you. And it's meant to symbolize what we have in Rome, our big high pine trees, very affectionately called the umbrella pines. So the idea was they would still have this feeling of walking outside in Rome. Once you then walked in, once your section was full, that was it, the gates would close. It was free of charge for people to come in because Vespasian wanted to encourage people to come and join the games for 2 particular reasons. 1, to distract them from all the destruction that Nero had left behind, and 2, have them absolutely not think about the fact that the empire was in severe financial crisis. So when you walked in here now, you get a free ticket, you're invited practically by the emperor himself, life was good. You are then also going to walk in, just like in any other sports stadium, seeing advertisement. You're going to see, not quite the billboards, in our case, mosaics. You would see plaques of who was sponsoring the games, because the emperor is not paying for this out of his own pocket every single time. We had senators up for re-election. They need to sponsor several days of the games. You're going to see mosaics of the most famous gladiators fighting in there, flexing their muscles, fighting each other, fighting animals, and their names sometimes would have a circle with a line drawn through them. When you would see that, that means that that gladiator would have died in combat already, but because he was an MVP, most valuable player, his sponsors would still put up a mosaic in his honor. That's right, gladiators would have been sponsored athletes just like ours are today. Looking then further up on the Colosseum walls, you would have had beautiful first level entry to begin with. It was all covered in white marble, painted dark red halfway up, gold decor. You would have stucco decoration up in the ceiling. You would have frescoes in multiple colors decorating it as well. And you had drinking fountains, 100 of them, water pipes pulled in specifically for the Colosseum in order to give people water to drink. Water was the #1 drink that we offered, because seeing as the games went from sunrise to sunset, drinking anything but water wasn't heavily encouraged in order to avoid fights breaking out on the bleachers. This was the first amphitheater also that women could walk into. Do not believe Hollywood movies. Women are not mingling on the bleachers with men, not even of the imperial wives kind. Women, however, were allowed in the Colosseum, but relegated to the top section, aka the nosebleed section. But at least they got to come in, so they were pretty happy nonetheless. You could buy things to eat and drink in the Colosseum, and as the old adage says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The #1 thing that archaeologists have dug up from the drains in trying to find out the Colosseum secrets and stories, the food mostly found are pork ribs and chicken wings. We like what we like. They would dip them in a tomato paste or a fermented fish sauce called garum. We did not drink beer in ancient Rome. Beer was for the barbarians up in the north. While the Romans did drink wine, they would probably think that we are barbaric if they saw how we drank wine. They don't drink it undiluted like we do. They would mix about 1 part of wine with 2 parts of water. Wine is a natural purifier because of the alcohol inside. So even in Roman villas, there would be big kegs with the water with a dash of wine in it in order to keep them uncontaminated. And this, of course, actually means the Romans would wire their villas to have kegs into the water tap. So when you would open the water tap in a Roman house, wine would come out. So this is not something that frat houses in universities invented, the Romans did. Only 2% of ancient Romans have plumbing. But speaking now of plumbing, the Colosseum did have her own plumbing. One section of the aqueducts were led into the public restrooms inside the Colosseum in order to pump water in. Then we would also mix it with a reverse pressure of air, and the reverse pressure today is simply referred to as self-flushing toilets. So in the 1st century, we did have self-flushing toilets. But guys, when I say public toilets, you really need to take my word for it. There were no walls, there were no dividing stalls. We all just had to kind of sit together in a big U shape and have a little chit chat about life in general, and then you could wash yourself up with water. But if you had bigger needs you needed to clean up, there was also the communal stick with a sponge. Maybe some inventions we are grateful in modern times. What do you think? Now in the Colosseum, once you got and found your seat, the games would begin. The Colosseum would mainly have public execution and animal hunts in the mornings. Animals would have been dragged in from all 4 corners of the known world to the Romans of the time, and they would have everything from chickens and roosters and cats and dogs, from elephants, leopards, giraffes, rhinos. No animal was too big or too small to be introduced into the games. When the first inaugurational games of the Colosseum went off, they were 100 days long, with over 3,000 animals that would meet their demise in these games. The longest games, however, were 1,000 days in the 2nd century AD under Commodus. Emperor Commodus did fight as a gladiator. He was, of course, an emperor, which means that he had access to all the best trainers. And then the fact that he rigs the fights, of course, doesn't hurt his glorious career either. He would stand on a raised podium in an arena and he would shoot animals with bows and arrows, killing hundreds at a time. Although they say that about 1 million people have died inside the Colosseum, it is said that up to 5 times more animals have met their end inside the arena. Interesting fact though is that the Romans, although the animal games were quite spectacular, they did not take to some of them the same way as they did others. Leopards, for example, were shown in mosaics with gladiators with actual names given to them and laurel wreaths underneath their stomachs, and a laurel wreath is a symbol of the highest honor for a warrior and an honorable fighter. So they were considered of great standard and of great honor. Elephant fights, however, in one of the instances there were elephants fighting, and at one point elephants were wounded and they couldn't run. They huddled together and started trumpeting out this wailing, beseeching sound, reducing the entire arena to tears, calling for Pompey's head who had organized the games, and it led to a great lack of popularity of elephant games. It doesn't mean that they would end, but they were not at all as popular as other games were. When it comes then to the arena, a lot of exotic animals would be introduced to the Romans for the first time ever. Lions was one of them. The first time lions were introduced to Rome was in the Colosseum arena, 100 lions and 100 lionesses all at the same time. Their combined roar so mighty that the entire stadium fell silent. The Colosseum and her gladiator games are, however, perhaps what she's the most famous for. The word gladiator comes from the Latin word gladiolus, which means swords. These were swordsmen. And originally, these were actually hired actors that would reenact battles at funerals to show the prominent glories of someone's life, sending him to the afterlife with all the bells and whistles. These games become so popular, they eventually will move into the stadiums, and the gladiators will blossom into having dozens and dozens of different kinds of names, simply depending on their armor, weapon, or fighting style. Gladiators will become trained professionals. Not all gladiators will be slaves, although the majority of them will be prisoners of wars or slaves. If I did not consider you worthy of training, I gave you a basic boot camp of 3 to 5 weeks, so you know how to move with a weapon, but you are essentially what we would consider cannon fodder. You're meant to be sent into arena in reenactments of battles or against animals, or you're not expected to win or have a very favorable outcome. Now you as a gladiator would not know this, of course. I promise you riches and freedoms and all the things that you want in order to motivate you to fight. And if you did not fight, there were plenty of ways I could show you how to motivate you, including quartering. Meaning we tie you up to 4 horses or 4 oxen and simply have them walk in 4 different directions, and the rest I'm sure you can imagine what happens. A gladiator, however, that was worthy of training would be sent to a ludus magnus, a gladiator training school for a minimum of 1 year, maybe even 2. And this of course means I have no interest in watching you die in the arena. We teach them choreographed battle. That's right, fake fighting. Like a stuntman, or even better comparison, WWF wrestling. That's gladiators for you. We're going to make it look real. We're going to take pouches made of the intestines of small animals, fill them with goat blood or chicken blood. I'm going to hide them in my clothing and put them in my mouth. We have this great type of fighting. I bite the back, boom, I spit out the blood. It's all very dramatic and scenographic. And then I will mysteriously rise from the dead in time for next round. Your absolute top gladiators won't fight more than 10 fights a year. We need to pace them for the championships. In the meantime, they train the other gladiators. And also, we did have female gladiators, always referred to as the Amazons, after the fierce female warriors of mythology. Female gladiators were a huge thing in Rome. We had some of the biggest groups and amounts of them in this city, which made it even more popular to come to the games. When it comes to the Colosseum and her games, gladiatorial or otherwise, I could talk infinite amounts of time about this, as you can probably imagine. But the most important thing that perhaps realizing about the Colosseum was that it wasn't really a place for fun and for games. It was a place of important political PR. You see, 98% of the Romans had no access to healthcare, to education. They lived quite miserable lives most of the times. But for one fleeting moment, in inviting them into the arena and having them have the deciding power with the emperor, because only the emperor decides in the Colosseum who lives or dies. But he would ask Romans, what say you? And for one moment in life, you were Roman. Above all your other concerns in life, you belong to a nation, you belong to a brand, you belong to a symbol bigger than yourself. You were Roman. So we play on the mentality of nationality being superior above all else in humanity. Nationality trumping humanity. This right here would let the Romans forget about their daily troubles, demanding perhaps lower taxes or improved plumbing, because we're in the arena. I'm executing your public emir number one, a captured military king from a rivaling tribe. You don't actually know if he has done anything to Rome, but the emperor says he has, and now he's at your mercy, reduced to nothing, because you and the rest of Rome are stronger than anything. This, my friends, is a game that many a government has played ever since then in the Western Hemisphere, and I could argue still play to this day. The start of all that was the Colosseum, but not the end so far. Whether we talk about the past or whether we talk about the present, being inside the Colosseum is an extraordinary experience that you must experience at least once in your life. Walking inside the Colosseum, you walk in the very footsteps of history itself. All the names that you have read about and learned about have been in those places. In touching a wall of the Colosseum, you are touching history spanning 2 millenniums of time. It's one of the most extraordinary experiences that you can have. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to learn more about Roman history, subscribe to this channel. And if you want to travel to Rome or any other dream trip that you have in mind, reach out to me. Remember, if you dream it, me as your travel advisor, I will deliver it. Ciao!